Maybe. Yep. We're live.
Yes.
Now, bear with us, folks. Alright, invite guests to the studio, no. But how do we, I guess you go to my Facebook, my profile, this should be on there, and just share it to your page, and then we can just get started if you want. Yeah, that's weird that it wouldn't work on yours, though. That's got to be a settings thing or something. Something we're not understanding. But I love this music, though. This music hits.
Share to feed. All right, let me just. I'm gonna tag myself. Stephen Goodwin. All right, there we go. Christian Talk. All right, let me tag
audio. Right. Very good. I think we're good.
We are good. I am. Yep.
Yep, I see us.
Yep, I see. You know what? I'm gonna. Where's my brother? I'm gonna throw my brother on here because my brother. I don't think I'm friends with Alex. Am I friends with your brother?
I don't know. Maybe. Possibly.
No, I don't think so. But Joshua Quinn. All right, I got my brother. All right, so there we go. So let's save. All right, there we go. All right, there we go. Looks like I am good. It's
Sweet.
on my page. Let me just make sure that we are good to go.
I didn't even know there was a little thing on here. I don't even know what that does.
All right. Yeah, there we go. We are good to go. Yep, all right, perfect. So we got StreamYard going. We are good to go, my friend.
Awesome. All right, you want to introduce it? And
yes, sir.
We're already live, so people are already tuning in. They're already excited.
Yeah. So this is the first time. So we've got Discover Your Voice, which is the sort of the media venture that I'm doing, and then we've got Exploring with Phil. So this is something that is completely new to me. So using a completely different platform. So we'll see who all joins. Not quite sure what to make of this. So we'll see exactly what happens. But so just to give you a little background, Phil and I have known each other for I think we were in, I don't know if we were in junior high together, if that's when we got to know each other, but we've known each other ever since Onset, Massachusetts, when my dad pastored a church. My dad pastored a church called Emmanuel Assembly of God, located in Onset, Massachusetts. And so Phil started attending that church with his mom Vicky, and then his brother Alex, and then he has a younger sister Sarah, who got married recently. And so Phil and I reconnected. Was actually at a funeral. So it's amazing what happens when death occurs. So when death occurs, sometimes it can bring people back together. And so Phil and I got connected while I was still living in Massachusetts. And now here we are, however many years later, and we decided we were going to do a joint session. So what I'm going to do is, some of you on my page know me, but no one really knows Phil. So I'm going to let Phil introduce himself and just kind of explain exactly what he does and the purpose behind this video.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do me a favor, could you tell your producer just to turn down the music just a little bit? It'd be just a tiny bit. Awesome. See, we're nice and fancy this week. But first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here to talk about a myriad of different things. But it is weird, even just like reconnecting and talking with you now, or even like getting ready for this, because it was a whole I would say hassle, but it was an adventure getting to this moment to be able to
Yeah.
record and figuring that all out and stuff like that. But yeah, like Steven said, we've known each other for a long time. It's amazing to me how the years go by. It just goes faster and faster. I don't know what that's about. It's crazy to me that we've known each other for like, I don't want to say how long, but it's a very long time if you like think about it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to say the year, but it was in the 90s. You know,
Yeah.
in the 1990s is, you know, you can do the math on that. So, you know, that's a long time. So like he said, his dad became the pastor of our church. We met shortly after that. We became friends after that. You know, and then Steven ended up going to college, having his own journey. We kind of like went different ways. And then, like he said, we kind of came back together in a funeral. So I just want to thank you for having me on. It's going to be an awesome discussion talking about the supernatural and the paranormal, the strange, and all that kind of stuff. Definitely a lot of things to get into because I mean we could take it a myriad of different directions for sure. But yeah, I don't know where you want to start. I mean, I don't know if you want to start. I could tell like a quick. Actually, I was thinking about this today, and if you want, I can share a quick story, like a paranormal thing that happened to me when I was a kid, after leaving church, at that very church. Now, this was before your dad was the pastor of our church, and so this is probably, I don't know, a year or two before your dad was the pastor of the church, and so it was a weeknight. I can't tell you exactly what night it was. Maybe a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday or something. It was a prayer meeting night. And back in those days, a lot of churches would have prayer meeting nights, you know, and they, you know, I wouldn't say they were extremely well attended, but there was a dedicated, you know, 10, 12 people that would always show up for prayer meeting. And that was the whole service. It was just a service to people would go up, you know, and pray. And so this is when early on when we started going to church. And so I was very new to church at this time. You know, I'm only, I don't know, probably 8 years old at this point, 9 years old, maybe, you know, very early on going to church. Maybe, I think at this point, I've probably given my life to Christ. And, you know, we'd probably been going to church for less than a year, but not quite a year. So we'll go into not Bible study, it's prayer meeting. And so mom asked me if I want to go with her to the prayer meeting. And so normally I wouldn't normally go because as a child, you know, let's be honest, you know, you maybe pray for like 2 minutes, but then after that you're like, I'm bored. What am I doing here? You know what I mean? You're a kid, you know, the kids, you know, that's how kids are. And so, you know, the prayer meetings, you know, everything's fine, you know, the prayer meeting ends. And so we're leaving and we're outside, and across the street from the church, there's this school there. And in front of the school, there's this grass area where there's trees and, you know, just kind of a nice little area where, you know, we'd have like many church picnic volleyball games and stuff like that. You know, so it was just an area where people would congregate after services and stuff like that. So my mom and her friend, Marie Smith, which is a deep cut for Steven. Marie Smith was there with my mom, and they're talking with each other. You know, I don't even remember about what. You know, about life, whatever, you know, the Lord. And so the car we drove in was a van. It was one of those vans that, not like a minivan, but it was a van that had like no windows, kind of like a commercial van. It was like my dad's work van, basically. So we drove that in. So they're talking, you know, doing their thing. I'm just kind of standing there bored, looking around. And so I look at our van, and in the driver's seat of the van, I see what looks like this like shadowy, dark kind of like figure, but not like a solid figure, but always kind of, best thing to describe is like a shadow. But it had a face, and it had its hands on the steering wheel.
Wow.
And it was looking over at me, you know, towards my direction, at me, laughing at me, you know, and I could see this. And so of course I start freaking out. I'm like, you know, Mom, there's someone over in the car, and he's like laughing at me, blah blah blah. And so of course my mom doesn't see anything, you know, at all at the time. And so her and Marie, they pray. You know, we pray, and then by the time the prayer ends, you know, in a matter of, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes, not even. The prayer's over. I look back up, and there's no one in the van anymore. There's no one there, and that's pretty much the end of the story, right then and there. But that was one of my first, like, really serious, like, paranormal experiences. As far as, like, I mean, definitely I would consider it a spiritual attack on some level, at least a fear kind of a thing.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I look at it. I mean, why would you do that to a child?
Right.
So that's just evil for sure. But definitely unnerving for sure if you're a child and see something like that, for sure. But,
Yeah. Well,
the Lord was there, though.
yeah. Yeah. What most people don't realize too is about Emmanuel. So the church,
Mhm.
and this might attribute to it, there's the church that was actually right next to Emmanuel, was an actual Satanist church, if I remember correctly. And so this was literally a battle between good and evil, between light and darkness, truth and lies. So it was, as Phil was talking, I was remembering the church, and you just walk by, and even at a young age, this is pre-Bible college, pre-everything, wasn't even really grounded in my faith. But you could just feel the darkness. You could just feel the evil. You could just feel it. You could. It was sort of my first exposure to even witchcraft. And I remember doing prayer walks. Prayer was a big thing, so I remember doing prayer walks in Onset. And so it was really interesting when I go back and I look at this, because just to think about the fact, like, most people in today's day, like, you don't think of a Pentecostal church, a charismatic church, being right next door to a Satanist church. Like, you just don't think of that. And yet this was exactly where we were. And so whether or not it attributed to it, I don't know. But there's not a doubt in my mind that the two probably aren't in some way connected. Just to sort of give an example of mine. So mine wasn't nearly as I think as intense as yours, but I remember when I was in Bible college, it was my sophomore year of Bible college, and I was doing security. So I would start my security shift at 9, and it would be 9 to 12. So I would sit in a security booth from 9 to 12, and I finished my shift at midnight. Went back to the room, did my normal stuff to get ready for bed. Got in bed, and no sooner had I closed my eyes than all of a sudden I was just completely overwhelmed and gripped with fear. I couldn't open my eyes because I was afraid that if I opened my eyes, I was afraid of what I might see. But I felt this tremendous presence. And we know in the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear. So we know that fear isn't of God because it involves torment. So, but that's exactly how I felt. I felt myself tormented. I felt myself completely unable to move. And this is what people talk about when they talk about, like, sleep paralysis and different things like that.
Yep.
There was a book that was written. I forget who it was written by, but it's called "They Come Out at Night." And there's a lot of people that suffer from sleep paralysis. And what most people don't realize, sleep paralysis is a very real thing. It's a very spiritual thing. It has its roots in the demonic. It has its roots in the supernatural realm. And so I was just paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move my body, couldn't open my eyes. And the only thing that I could do, I remember this as clear as day. I will never forget it as long as I live. The only thing that I could do was literally just say the name of Jesus. Like, I couldn't even audibly say it, right? So most people think you just got to say it out loud. You got to do this. I couldn't audibly say it because I just completely overwhelmed with fear, completely consumed with fear. And then I remember just whispering internally at first, and then the more I said it, the more I rehearsed it, the more it was as if this presence just sort of began to its stronghold. It just began to. And another thing that I remember as clear as day about this is I was being led to do a Bible study. I'm like, if we're going to talk about spiritual warfare, we've got to know who our enemy is. We've got to know. And so I was doing a Bible study on Satan and just the names of Satan, how he operates and everything like that. So I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were linked. I know that they were connected. Phil explained his encounter, and if I'm not, this was where we held the picnics between the two buildings, right, in that little grassy area.
No,
Or
the other side,
the other,
like
the other side. Got it. So between
Hammond
the
School,
parsonage and the church. Got it. Where we
yeah,
had the clam boils and everything like that.
yeah,
Yep, I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
yep, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. So what most people don't realize is this connection that exists. So what I'm gonna do is, based on everything like that, I'm gonna just let Phil sort of, that's how his journey started. But I want him to tell you exactly how that journey has culminated and where it's brought him sort of to where he's at today. Because I want to sort of delve into the link and the connection, between what Phil does and also the supernatural and the spiritual, with the time that we have together tonight.
yeah, absolutely, definitely. Yeah, so I mean, so much to get into, but just to tie a little knot about Onset. Onset has a crazy history, like you were kind of alluding to. Now,
Yep.
Onset was founded by spiritualists. Now, the
Yep.
spiritualist movement was, just to give people an idea of like the spiritual warfare going on in Onset, because there is spiritual warfare, and this is why there's so many hauntings and so many things happening, and just crazy things happening. Because I've had, that's not just the only thing that's happened to me in Onset. There's been other instances. I mean, I hate to drop this because it's like I can't just say this and then not like talk about it. But I mean, I've seen possessions in Onset,
Yeah.
of actual people I know, so I know that they weren't faking it, and this real life stuff. So like Onset, and so the spiritualist people were people who did a lot of seances and sort of contacting the dead, but maybe not necessarily in the most savory ways of all times. I mean, just because, when you have a whole town of people doing all these seances, even if their intentions are, oh, we're just going to talk to these people, blah blah blah. When you're opening that many doors, and Lord, things can come through, and things are going to come through whether you want them to come through or not. Whether you're inviting them or not. If you open the door, something can walk through that door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of if they want to or not, Yeah, dude. So that's just to give a little bit of history about Onset and why that maybe, like Steven was saying, there's a whole other part of Onset, and that's kind of like maybe why there's so much stuff going on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my journey as far as in with the Lord, and in as far as the paranormal and how it's like kind of shaped my life, and because I've had all these experiences throughout my life. I've talked about one of them. I'm not going to bore you guys with every single one of them, but I've had a lot of different experiences where I've either had, spiritual attacks in dreams, kind of like what Steven was saying with the sleep paralysis. That's absolutely a real thing. And you hit the nail on the head, because every single person that's ever talked to me about sleep paralysis said similar things. And these people aren't necessarily Christians kind of thing. Like, they may have went into it being like, oh, this is just a real thing, but then as time goes on and they're like kind of tortured by this entity or whatever this thing is, it's quite clearly more than just a medical thing. So much so that one guy was telling me, Oscar is a friend of mine. He has his own podcast that talks about the paranormal. He's had this kind of experience, just like you. With him, it was one of those things where the moment he would there was a moment where he's like sitting on his couch, like looking at his phone. All of a sudden he takes his eyes off his phone, and he's like, as soon as he knew that in that moment, he took his eyes off his phone, he knew that it was coming. He could feel it, like that, sleep paralysis thing, and then he couldn't move. And then right before that, this is where it gets creepy. He sees what looks like his girlfriend walk by, right? And so then he's like, oh, that's kind of weird. He goes to check on her. She's not even in that room. She's like in a completely different room. So he saw something walk by that looked like his girlfriend, or pretending to be his girlfriend or something. So that's and then to have that happen right after it, like all these things are connected as far as the sleep paralysis too. I wanted to bring that up too. So my journey has just been wild. Just experiencing a lot of different things, and not only that, my uncle and my family had a story about a bunch of strange things that happened to them in a house in Onset, where a bunch of poltergeist type activity, like things moving around the house, and it all culminated to, I mean, dude, it's just weird. Maybe it's just like it's gonna turn into like a paranormal onset, but like
Yeah.
onset's just wild, dude. So
Yep.
like in this house, one of the things that happened. This is gonna be interesting because I think it could segue into something that could be an explanation that's maybe not necessarily demonic, but could be a valid explanation of why some paranormal things are happening, as far as like an explanation of why certain things happen. So this is weird. So one of the stories from this house is when they were living there at the end of the summer. As you know, in Onset, it's a summer type place, so a lot of people come from the summer, then they leave, and then in the winter it's a lot quieter in the town, generally speaking. So
Yeah.
it was even more so like that back in the 70s, 60s, and stuff. So this is late 70s, early 80s. This is my Uncle Michael. This is my mom, my Auntie Dottie. They're living in this apartment. This is before my mom and dad are even married. So they're dating at the time. So they live in this house. All these crazy things are happening up to this point. So end of summer, all of a sudden they hear a baby crying, and they're like, this is kind of weird. Like, where's that baby coming from? So they're looking around, they're looking outside. They're like, it's coming from this house, but this house is empty.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh my God, someone abandoned their child here. We got to call the cops. So they call the cops. The cops show up. They go through the house. No baby. No one inside the home. No one around. So I'm telling the story to my aunt, who's on the other side of the family. And she lived in that neighborhood maybe 15 years before this event. They heard the same thing. They heard a baby crying inside of a home that was empty, which is weird, right? And so fast forward to 2011, my cousin JP was dating a girl down the street from this home. She heard the same thing. So it's like, makes you wonder, like, what's going on there? You know what I mean? It's a very strange thing.
Yeah.
So I always look at like technology and, with our phones, right? In our phones, there's minerals that come from the earth, flash memory, and all these things that are in the earth that we are able to use to record things on and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is a possibility that sometimes some of these things, kind of like this baby thing, like maybe not necessarily it's a demon or anything like that, maybe that there's something that happened in the past and it's just like replaying over and over, or somehow, some way, just like a phone video clip, it'll like replay, and there's no one actually there, there's nothing there, it's just like a past memory or something like that. And they've sort of proven this with as far as like spoken word and stuff. They were doing like tests with rocks and other things that, like, could it be possible that like voices and events or whatever could be imprinted on natural minerals that are in the earth.
Yeah.
So like that could be a possibility as far as like things, maybe like things like that, or things like where people say they go to Gettysburg and they're like, I heard a cannon fire, or I heard this, that, and the other thing. And you know what I mean? It's like that kind of stuff could be a possibility too. And I just like to bring that up because it's more of like a rational explanation for some things. As far as like sounds, as far as awful things happening in a particular area, and it's kind of like a replay of that event.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the biggest reason why I wanted to do this video, and so it's interesting because, I mean, the church that I'm a part of is big into the ministry of deliverance. So it's heavily involved with deliverances. I've seen deliverances take place at the altar. So I've seen people vomit. I've seen people, I've seen kind of people like riot. I've seen so much just being at the church that I go to. And it's interesting because I believe it was last year, a movie came out called Come Out in Jesus' Name. And it was purely all about this. It was purely all about the demonic. It was about deliverance. And so it's where I kind of really, started whetting my appetite for the supernatural, for the spiritual. And then once again, I started reading books on spiritual warfare, started reading a lot of Derek Prince, who deals a lot with spiritual warfare. And so I've always been curious on the connection that exists between what Phil does. And now Phil hasn't even delved into what he actually does. So he's got an Instagram channel that he calls, it's called Exploring with Phil. And so on it, you can find a lot of his videos and what he actually does. He's heavily in Massachusetts. So the reason why I've kind of wanted to do this video is because I want to sort of try and wrestle with the link between what Phil sort of experiences in what people would call the paranormal, right? A lot of people I think are freaked out about that. A lot of people are sort of spooked by it. And the only example that I really know of in the Bible with it is when Saul, king of Israel, consulted the witch of Endor. And at this point, they were killing the witches. It was, Saul was putting to death all the witches in the land. And yet, when he showed up disguised, and the witch didn't really know who it was. And the witch didn't really know who it was until she actually saw who it was that Saul wanted to bring up, and she saw Samuel, and she realized that it was Saul that was in front of her. So this is my only real understanding of this as it pertains to the supernatural. And so, what I want to do is, I don't know, Phil, what you've heard, because in all of your research and all of your investigation, because I think that's pretty much what they would call you, an investigator.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would consider or classify yourself as something different, but I've watched some of the videos, and it's definitely sort of an investigator. You go out and you listen for the sounds, you listen for the messages, you listen for all these different things. And the other thing too is what people talk about. I remember shows. I don't know if it was called Something from the Other Side, where it was basically this person who was, he would speak to loved ones, right? He would speak to loved ones. He would tell the loved ones what they would say and all of these different things. And it would usually bring the people to tears and so my understanding of all of this has been, okay, is the paranormal real? And I almost feel like the two may be sort of connected, if not one and the same, paranormal than the supernatural realm. Because what I've heard is that what's portrayed as, let's say, deceased loved ones, what's portrayed as all of this stuff. And what most people don't understand too is Phil and I have both experienced death. Phil and I both share the same testimony in that we both lost our fathers. So I remember very vividly when Phil's dad, Wally, died, and so, and I remember when my dad passed away from COVID. So I think it was around the same time, if I'm not mistaken. Shortly after my dad died, I remember, seeing that Wally had died. And so, I try and picture this, if somebody wanted to come to Phil and I and started, saying, oh, we could bring your dads back, we could, what that would look like. So just want to go on the record. No, I'm not looking to bring my dad back. No, I'm not looking. So my dad is cremated. And so my brother and I have half of my dad. So yeah, so I don't see that happening. But what I want to sort of understand, and just based on your experiences, like, have you seen the correlation? Have people approached the subject of what you do and its connection to sort of the supernatural and the spiritual realm? Just because I feel like what you're doing sort of on the paranormal side, where you go out and, you look for Casper, the friendly ghost, and, it's everything like that. And for me, I see it in the church that I go to and stuff like that. I see it from the side of deliverance. So I think we would all agree that there's definitely unseen forces. And not to get super out off the deep end, this is Tucker Carlson. I was talking to my pastor about this Tuesday night after class. And Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan, out of all places to go. He go on Joe Rogan. Now, if you go on Joe Rogan, you either go with a specific message to be heard because he's got a massive audience. So if you go on Joe Rogan, then you're going to, you're not going to hold any punches. And so this even can tie into the whole, alien UFO phenomenon. And I've heard people even talk about that it's what we see and understand about that is people will look at it as extraterrestrial. So, right, Phil delves into the paranormal. We've also got the extraterrestrial. But at the end of the day, the biggest question that I have is both the extraterrestrial and the paranormal, are they two sides of the same coin and have the same source? And that's the demonic. That's the forces of darkness, right? The Bible makes it very clear. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood. So we have to understand this, You know, we know demonic possession is real. We know that that's real. But Phil is experiencing something that is a lot different, where I'm sure the stories that you can share about stuff that you've heard, stuff that you've maybe seen. So I would like to just, sort of get your take on, what are people saying about this and sort of its connection to the supernatural? Oh, because Tucker Carlson, this is where I was going. Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan, and he admitted to what we see and understand as this extraterrestrial is supernatural in nature. And so it's not at all what we're being told. It's not at all what we're being led to believe. It's a delusion. It's a deception. And so he went on and said that, what people think of as paranormal, not paranormal, UFOs, aliens, is basically just supernatural in nature. So I can't help but see the same thing with you, Phil. So I'm just going to ask you, sort of what your experiences have been.
So my take on the paranormal, I think you're right. It is all connected. I think it definitely is connected. I think I'm definitely in the camp of people who think there's a possibility. I'm willing to believe there's a possibility, at the very least, that aliens are either fallen angels or working with fallen angels, or fallen angels who are pretending to be something else. I've felt that way for the past few years, and what really, really hit it home for me, that is definitely what's happening here, and is there was this guy, I'm gonna butcher his name because I can't remember his name. I think his name is Chris. I can't remember his last name, but he was a big UFO guy. I'm gonna tell this story like really short, but he tells like this hour-and-a-half story about how he's really into UFOs. He's starting to do research. Then he's out in the field. He's seeing UFOs, and then all of a sudden there's this voice in his head that tells him, "Hey, why don't you show up over here? You'll see a UFO." He goes to that spot. He sees UFO. Fast forward a few months later, it gets more intense, more intense, more intense. Then he starts getting messages, all leading to a point where like a few years go by, and then it leads to a point where he doesn't even want to be in contact with these things anymore. And so much so that he has this event that happens in his home. And this is not a Christian guy, right? This is a guy that's just an alien guy. He has he has an event in his home where it sounds like something with nails, like walking on his floor, like hardwood floor around his home. And it was telling him to go out there and see what it was. So I do think that the aliens are definitely not from another planet. Well, I guess if you consider heaven another planet, then maybe. But I think they are. I think they are fallen angels for sure, and they're trying to deceive people. And not only that, but I mean, would you be surprised? I mean, this is going out there, but if all of a sudden this UFO comes down and then this person comes out and they're like, "I'm the Messiah. I'm the one you've been looking for. We are the alien." I mean, a lot of people would be deceived.
Right.
I mean, like that sounds it sounds crazy on one hand, but on the other side of the coin, you're like, does it sound crazy? Because that could be possible. And I do think there is a also not only fallen angel connection. There could be, I don't know how you feel about this, or if you've done any research on this, or there's a lot of people out there. It's more of a recent thing that's kind of gotten traction in the past few years as far as in the Christian circles, and that's Nephilim. Now, the Nephilim, for those people who don't know, the Nephilim were basically the offspring of fallen angels and women who created these like superhuman, godlike people, essentially. And they were, the Bible describes them as men of renown and kings or something like that. So they were mighty men, or like not mighty men, not David's mighty men, but mighty men, and just had amazing powers. I mean, you can imagine they're half angels. So there's a theory that, because a lot of people think that the flood is partially not only because of the sins of the earth, but also the Nephilim connection and humanity being perverted by the angels, and not only that, possibly other creations being perverted by angels as well, which could explain a lot of other cryptid type animals as well. Your half human, half goat things, or your Sasquatch even, possibly. Bigfoot could be a half Nephilim, half ape type creature. And because some people say, oh, it just like disappeared out of nowhere, or there's been multiple reports of many different cryptids that disappear and have all these like powers and do all these things, and it's like it's not out of the realm of possibility that this could have a Nephilim connection, because Nephilim existed before the flood, and then the flood happens, and then they also exist after, because Goliath and all those other I don't want to get the names wrong. They're hard names to say, but you can look them up. There's a bunch of different tribes and peoples that are a part of this bloodline. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could be the aliens as well, is where I was kind of going with that, or some of the aliens. Like some of the aliens are described as like there's different kinds, like the Nordics. There's this, there's that. Like all of these things could be possible Nephilim related as well, and that's a whole other subject. But something that's, as far as if you're a Christian looking at the paranormal, because a lot of Christians look at the paranormal and they'll either scoff at it, or be like everything's demonic, or just not even want to talk about it, or be afraid of it, you know. And being afraid of it is the last thing you should be afraid of, because the Lord gives you, power over all of these things. You don't have to be afraid of any of these things. You know what I mean? You shouldn't taunt them, but I'm just saying, like, the Lord is stronger than all of these things. So so that's kind of like where my head is at with all of that stuff. And then you get into the thing with like ghosts and familiar spirits, and a lot of what's weirdly strange about the familiar spirits, because I'm not sure what these familiar spirits are. I'm not sure if familiar spirits are these Nephilim that are kind of like disembodied people that are now these spirits that are either working for the Satan or are not a part of God's redemption arc because they're half angel. Like, I don't know how that's working. I'm just speculating. I don't know. So there's that aspect. And not only that, if you look at the King James and then the Geneva one before that, at like familiar spirits and stuff, there seems to be a difference between a human spirit and a familiar spirit. So I'm not sure what, and there's a lot of weird things in there as far as the Old Testament goes, because then there's this whole other angle where they're talking about familiar spirits, and they talk about like a bottle, and it's like a bottle that you drink, right? And you drink this bottle, and the spirit or whatever entity or whatever will come over you, and this entity will speak through you or something like that. And what's weird about that is, what did they call alcohol?
Right.
Like hard alcohol is spirits. And I never made that connection until I saw the bottle thing in there, and like a reference to that, and I'm like, wait a minute, dude, they call alcohol like certain alcohol spirits. And what happens if you drink that whole bottle? Your personality changes. You do things you wouldn't normally do. Sometimes you say things I'm not saying an entity's taking you over. I'm just saying it is kind of strange that they call hard alcohol spirits, and then they have this familiar spirits angle in the Bible where it talks about people drinking something and then something speaking through them. So just something I thought of that was kind of it piqued my interest, because I'm like, that's kind of interesting. So I know I'm kind of rambling about a bunch of different things, but these are kind of the things I've been like kind of thinking about lately. Because because in the Bible it says to work out your faith with fear and trembling. So I always try to do that. So I always look at this stuff and I'm like, what's really going on here? You know what I mean? And there's so many things in the Bible. Like, here's another thing I wanted to talk about. When Jesus dies on the cross and then he goes down into hell, there's a couple references in the Bible about like kind of what he does down there. Now, Peter mentions something about him preaching to the dead. In 1 Peter 3 or something, 3:19, I believe, or something like that. He mentions Jesus, or not even Jesus necessarily. He just mentions, wasn't the gospel not only for the living but for the dead? And so there's a mention there of like the gospel being preached to the dead. And then I looked up that reference, and there's also a reference that Greek people were possibly preaching to the dead as well. But then there was also a part saying that, oh, that's referring to Jesus going down into hell. Because the early church thought that when Jesus went down into hell, he possibly either freed the good people out of good Sheol, and like, I don't know. It's very complex because there's not like a lot of detail. on that. So it's kind of a lot of speculation. But to me, like, if Jesus went down there to preach, I wouldn't think he'd be preaching to Adam and Eve. I mean, I think they'd be already a part of the, I imagine he'd be preaching to the other people too. I don't know. At least that's what I would imagine Jesus to do, but I don't know. So that's kind of one of those things we don't really know what's going on down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that part of the Bible has always interested me, like what Jesus does after when he goes down into hell.
So, I mean, I know it's called the harrowing of hell. So that I do know. I know there's been paintings about it. You can Google it, the harrowing of hell when he goes down. And this is what Paul talks about in Ephesians when he said he led captivity captive. And so definitely understand that. Definitely no, but this is exactly what happens with Jesus, right? Remember in the book of Revelation, he says, I am he who was dead, but now I'm alive. And he said that he holds the keys of death and hell. So he has the keys. Paul says, oh death, where is your sting? Grave, where is your victory? So even the author of Hebrews says that it was for this reason that Christ was manifested, that he would destroy him who had the power over death, namely the devil. It was the Apostle John who spoke about Christ coming to actually destroy the works of darkness. So here's one thing that I've always believed, right? And I did a whole video on this. Most people, when we think about the cross, right, we think about, Jesus was on the cross for 6 hours. Max Lucado did a book called 6 Hours One Friday. So Jesus was on the cross for 6 hours. Now, 3 of those hours, the Bible talks about a gross darkness. It says a darkness almost like what you could experience or what you could expect when you read the book of Exodus, where like man couldn't even see his hand in front of his face because of the darkness. We oftentimes associate that. We think of maybe a solar eclipse. We think about, just whatever. I mean, we recently just came out of a solar eclipse that took the world by storm, or not the world, but the United States, and people just lost their minds with the recent eclipse. But I've always believed that the darkness that we find there, it's funny because it's during that time when Jesus cries, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I think you can catch a glimpse of what happens there at the cross, because I'm convinced, right? Jesus is surrounded by natural enemies. He's surrounded by people that are mocking him. He's surrounded by people that are scoffing. If you are the Son of God, come down. What did the devil say to Jesus in the wilderness? If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. And now you're hearing those same words while Jesus is on the cross. Now, what I've often believed and what I would propose to anyone watching this video is, what if the darkness wasn't a physical darkness that we understand it, but what if literally all of hell descended on the cross? What if it was the Bible speaks about principalities and spiritual wickedness and rulers of darkness. What if all of the forces of hell were gathered there at the cross they were throwing a party. They were rejoicing because Jesus was there on the cross. So here's how I envision it. They're all gloating. They're all jeering. You can see sort of their ridicule and their mocking through the scribes and the priests and the people that are walking by. But what if that darkness was literally all of hell surrounding Jesus, jeering at him, mocking him, scorning him? You could find this language even in Psalm chapter 22. That's a messianic psalm. And so, I would imagine this. Imagine all of hell rejoicing that Christ is hanging there on the cross. Here we are. We think we've got Christ. We've got Christ exactly where we want him. He's nailed to a cross. We've killed the Son of God, effectively killing God. They probably knew Emmanuel, God with us. So if we kill the Son, we kill. It's almost like that parable. This is the Son. This is the heir. Let's kill the Son. And so they killed the Son. But I would love it, right? They're throwing a party. They rejoice over Christ dying on the cross, right? Christ's body is taken off the cross. And I love it because they, like, a lot of times they could have just disregarded. I'm sure with Roman crucifixion, they could have just disregarded the bodies, right? They could have disregarded. They could have put it in a pit. They could have put it wherever. And yet what we find is they took his body and they put it in a borrowed tomb. And it's almost like they were preserved his body. And that's not almost exactly what was happening. His body was preserved. His body was concealed, right? Because unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone. So we find that the body of Jesus is there. Now his body is concealed in a tomb behind a stone. And yet what would happen if all of hell rejoiced over Christ at the cross, and yet the minute he said it is finished, the minute they saw him breathe his last, all of a sudden he goes down and he shows up on their territory. He shows up in their camp. It's funny, my pastor last night in church started singing a song, I went to the enemy's camp. And if you remember Onset, I'm sure we sang that song.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Camp, and I took back what he stole from me. But here's another thing that I find interesting that I think could support that, right? So in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel, we find that the children of Israel were engaged surprisingly against the same enemy that they're engaged with now. And the war that we see right now between Israel and Hamas is the war that predates, right? It predates the Holocaust. It goes all the way back to the book of Judges, goes all the way back. And so what we find that they were defeated, and they bring the Ark of the Covenant into battle, thinking that if they have the Ark of the Covenant, it would be the magic elixir, it would be the magical formula that would get them to where they would have victory over their enemies. What happens? They were defeated. Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of the priest, were killed. The high priest dies as well, and the Ark of God was captured by the enemy. Right. So what the children of Israel couldn't do, we think that the Ark being lost was just, we look at it as, oh, the battle's lost, it's all over, we've lost the Ark. But yet if you read the Ark, they brought the Ark and they put it in the temple of their God, and their God was Dagon. So it was half fish, half man. That was their God. And the first time they set up the Ark in front of Dagon, we find that he just simply fell forward before the Ark, fell on his face before the Ark, right? They put Dagon back in his place, and then they come back again the next morning, and the same thing. But now all of a sudden, he's dismembered, right? He's missing hands, he's missing his head, he's missing all of these different things. And so what ends up happening here, right? What ends up happening here is the Ark God begins to inflict tumors upon people. The Ark was literally brought into 3 of the 5 cities in what was then known as Philistia, which is one of the cities is actually what we know as Gaza today. Gaza is a biblical city. Gaza is a biblical place that you will find. The Gaza Strip is located, but you find these tumors. And so what I find incredibly interesting is what the children of Israel couldn't do in battle. It's almost like God went behind the scenes through, right? The Ark was the representation of the presence of God. God goes behind the scenes, right? Goes behind the scenes, and he starts wreaking havoc in the enemy's camp. He goes where Saul, king of Israel, couldn't go. He goes where Jonathan couldn't go. He goes where the children of Israel, and he actually goes in the enemy's territory, and he wreaks havoc. So much to the point where they're like, we need to get rid of the Ark. We need to get this thing out of here lest we perish. And so if God was willing to go behind enemy lines during there, then to Phil's point, and this is what the Bible preaches, it's almost like Jesus went behind enemy lines. And what does the Bible say? That the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. If Jesus says the gates of hell will not prevail, then guess what? It means there are actually gates of hell. And I did a video, and Phil's done a lot of videos, but I did a video called taking the fight to the gates. And I did this, really cool picture, at least in my estimation of it. And so Christ taking the battle. Now, here's what's amazing about that. And I'll let Phil talk about this too, is because that's what we're called to do as Christians, right? Phil mentioned that God has not given us a spirit of fear. He mentioned that we're not supposed to be afraid of all of these different things. And what did Jesus command us to do, right? I love the pastor of the church that I go to, because he attacks cessationists head on. Like, he goes after cessationists, and he goes after people that believe the gifts of the Holy Spirit were for the apostles only and everything like that. Mm-hmm. And so we've been given authority over unclean spirits. We've been given authority over demons. We've been given authority over it. And so if Jesus took the battle to the gates of hell, if Jesus went to hell and literally took hold of the keys, like Revelation says, he has the keys, which means he can unlock, he can bind, he can loose, he can do whatever he wants. And so now what did he tell us right before he ascended? And he already had the keys at this point. He didn't get the keys when he was in heaven. He ascended. Right. Two things Jesus ascended with, right? He ascended with scars. If you don't believe that he didn't ascend with scars, look at what he told Thomas. Put your hand in the print where the spear was. Put your finger in the print of the nail. So Jesus ascended with scars, and he ascended with keys. Two things that he ascended with. And this is important for us to recognize, because now Jesus said, all authority under heaven and earth is given unto me. But then he sends us out. It's what we find in Mark 2. So like this concept, and I love what Phil does, because Phil sort of brings it, he doesn't approach it from the standpoint of casting out demons, casting out unclean spirits. But what Phil does is he sort of highlights, and I love it because he highlights this very real phenomenon, that exists. Some people are crazed with extraterrestrial and UFOs and aliens and Project Bluebeam and all of these different things, Roswell, New Mexico, all of these different things. Now, Phil, I have to say, I've thought about that concept of the Antichrist showing up in a UFO and coming out and saying, I'm the Messiah. Like, I've thought about that. We could even delve into AI and whether or not the Antichrist could be AI. Right. They gave the power to the image of the beast to speak. Is it possibly a reference to AI? So we could go down a whole separate rabbit hole with that, which we're not going to do. But it's interesting because I've often wondered what would happen if in the midst of all this, and it blew up last year. Blew up where this, and I love it every time they talk about whistleblower, like there was a whistleblower about the, I got to be careful what I say about the other whistleblower. I don't want that. So if you're at all aware of the events of 2020 and all what whistleblowers I'm talking about. But last year there was a whistleblower about all this stuff that has not been disclosed to us. And you know what, though? Paul speaks about an end time delusion, right? He speaks about a mass delusion and a great falling away. And so I believe that what Phil is doing is he's kind of shining a light on this paranormal, and other people are shining light on the extraterrestrial. But at the end of the day, at the very heart of it all is one very important theme. And it's what Jesus said. He says, take heed that you do not be deceived. And I believe that a lot of people will take what Phil does with the paranormal, and they will be deceived by it. Phil mentioned opening doors. And so, goes down to Ouija boards and all of these different things, seances and sage and all of these different things. Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that Phil had his experience at the church that we both attended, and the church literally had a Satanist church right next to it. Like, I don't think it's any coincidence. And so people don't realize that the doors that they open up. And so the biggest thing that I want people to understand just from this video, just from this conversation of whether and it makes no difference. Like, I'm not trying to go off the deep end and talk about aliens and UFOs and Elon Musk summoning the demon, with AI. Like, I'm not gonna go off that deep end. But what I do want us to understand is that deception is going to be very real in the last days, and the enemy is going to do whatever he can to deceive us. And there are a lot of people that are going to buy this stuff hook, line, and sinker. And so what I love about Phil doing it is from the point of a Christian perspective, right? Do you know what the name of that show was? It was all about paranormal, unsolved mysteries.
Oh, yeah, Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, but I don't think it was
with Robert Stack.
I think so. Yeah, like all I remember is this deep voice. Unsolved Mysteries. That's all I remember. Yeah. But like all of these different things and all these different stories that you would see in like Reader's Digest, and I don't even think Reader's Digest is around anymore.
Yeah, I got the reference.
Yeah, but it's it's like, so I love what you do, because like I wonder, are people asking questions? Like, what's people's perception of this? Like, just of the paranormal, do you find people that are maybe more more afraid of it, that are more curious about it? Like, what's been because you have a whole page dedicated to it.
Mhm.
So what's been people's understanding of it?
I think most people are either, it's weird. People are either like curious about it, or they don't think it's really strange, or they don't think it's real at all, and so they,
Yeah.
will either make fun of you or say, this isn't real or whatever. So
Yeah.
you're always going to get that crowd. So you get that crowd, you get the people that are curious, you get the people that are like true believers, or like people that believe in like the paranormal or things that happening, or that kind of thing. So, and then you have people that are a little bit more skeptical. So it's like all across the board. I think over the past year, I've really tried to um, highlight the spiritual warfare that happens sometimes, not all the times in my videos, but a few occasions. There's been a few videos where I've done where where it was definitely
Yeah.
spiritual warfare, spiritual attack, and and I say that in the video, we talk about it, and then when the video came out, we talked about what happened that night. So like I've definitely made people more aware of things like this happening, because
Yeah.
without me talking about it, because I'll be honest, not a lot of people talk about this kind of stuff as far
Right.
as like real spiritual warfare, like going into some location like you said, where you went back to your room and then all of a sudden it felt like darkness and evil was around you and like oppressing
Yeah.
you, and like that can be a real thing for many people. And I think a lot of people either just don't understand what it is, or just think it's in their head, or like, but my goal in the last year is to try to show people that yes, evil does exist out there. Yes, but not only that, but also good exists. God exists, evil exists. One of my recent videos I went to a location that has a lot of Freetown State Forest, has a lot of evil past. A lot of murders have happened there. A lot of just negative things have happened there. So it seems to me, in my eyes, to be a spot where evil is, or evil likes to be, or evil things have been drawn there because of the evil things that have happened there. I don't know what the connection is, but obviously something evil is there or wanting to be there. And what really hammers it home is when I go there, because when you're a Christian, the Holy Spirit lives inside you, the Lord lives inside you, and when evil things are around you, they see that and they know that, and they cannot help themselves. Believe me, they cannot help themselves. They will make it known, and that whole video, there's a whole chunk of it where they're talking about God, they're talking about the ministry, they're talking about all these different things, and all relating to like a spiritual warfare between them and God, basically a battle, essentially was, and that tells me that evil is there, you know what I mean? And like I said, it cannot help itself but to reveal itself when God is there, you know what I mean? So like when stuff like that happens, I make that the name of the video, good versus evil, and I make sure to really pinpoint that, be like, hey, because the way I look at it, if one person comes to Christ because of this video, or even opens their eyes to the possibility that the Lord exists, because if you're willing to believe that the paranormal exists, then I'm sorry, but you're probably going to be more willing to believe that God exists too. You know what I mean? Especially if you're a person that's never gone to church or something. Like, this could be an entryway into you learning who Jesus is, because if you're willing to believe in, supernatural things on one aspect, then, they might be willing to believe in Jesus. Maybe they just haven't heard, you know what I mean? So that's something that I've, in the last year, been trying to like, not like overly focus on, but focus on in my videos. I do a prayer request thing in the beginning of my video now for the past few months, being like, if you want me to pray for you, message me, I will pray for you, whatever if you need help, whatever. And I will say, one person has reached out to me in the past like 6 months, and at least has told me that they've come to Christ. So I think that is an awesome thing, and so I'm happy that the Lord even used me in a way to help this person come to Christ. You know what I mean? So like, if nothing else, like that is more than enough for me. And so I think there's an avenue in the paranormal for someone like me to show people that there's more than meets the eye is what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it really is. It's dominated by, witchcraft. It's dominated by, things that are portrayed as good and as evil. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things in the paranormal community that are portrayed as good and it's not. So like there's not a lot of opposition there, and I'm kind of like the only. I mean, there might be some others, but you know what I'm saying. It's kind of a, it's an interesting subject for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing that you touched on that I just want to highlight is, so if you watch this video live or you watch it back afterwards, if you're at all familiar with the Celtic, so Celtics were out of Scotland, Ireland. You've heard the St. Patrick and all of these different things, but one of the phrases that they would use in Celtic is they call it a thin place. And what a thin place was it was a place that had been so consecrated, so sanctified by prayer and holiness that it was almost like heaven and earth came together. It was a thin place. There wasn't this sort of distance or chasm that people understand when they're like, heaven is brass. It doesn't seem like God is around. It doesn't seem like God's listening to me. Where is God? There were these thin places where it seemed like miracles happened on the regular, where you could just feel God's presence. And Rebecca Freelander, you can find this on PureFlix, you can find this, I believe, on Amazon, but she talks about thin places. And it's these places that exist where the atmosphere between heaven and earth seemed to be so charged that it's like you could just feel the presence and the glory of God. Why do I even talk about thin places? Because Phil mentioned something. He mentioned about stuff that had happened there, murder, witchcraft, and all of those different things. And now, as a result of that, because of what happened in the past, now all of a sudden you've got this activity that takes place in the present. And the Bible actually gives a phrase and a word to that. We oftentimes understand it in our minds, but what the Bible actually calls that is a stronghold, right? The Bible calls it a stronghold. And so we've got to be very careful with what we allow in our lives, because in one of the videos I did, I said what you tolerate will eventually dominate. And the reference was in regards to Jezebel in the book of Revelation. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, but what you tolerate in your life, regardless of whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's pornography, whatever it may be, whatever you tolerate in your life will dominate you and will eventually become a stronghold. And so what I love about what Phil is saying and what he does is because he's seeing this, sort of firsthand. And it's in a different light though, right? Because I'm used to seeing it in church, people vomiting, people, some people even writhing and stuff like that. And so and we believe strongholds, people that have to be delivered, the strongholds that have to be broken, strongholds in their mind, but there can actually be geographical strongholds, right? Remember what about the book of Daniel? Daniel prayed and said, from the moment you prayed, I already sent the answer, but I was withstood for 21 days. Why? Because of the prince of Persia. There was that stronghold. There was that war between good and evil. And so what Phil is actually doing is, I would say to some degree, you're going into places where there are spiritual strongholds. What you're seeing is a manifestation of the spirit of the strongholds that are in existence, whether because of the witchcraft that was done, seances, Ouija boards. I mean, we could go into the whole Bohemian Grove out in California. And if those of you who watch this video don't know about the Bohemian Grove, I want to be very careful with the terminology that I use, because I don't want to use terminology that I consider buzzwords on the internet. But if you look at the Bohemian Grove and sacrifice and the shedding of blood and all of this stuff, the Bible talks about life is in the blood. And the blood is to be, that's why the Bible says, do not eat anything with the blood in it. That was in the book of Leviticus. And so what we find is just this, not only just this dichotomy between good and evil, but we find the contrast between spiritual thin places and strongholds. And so what Phil has made very clear is, with what he does, is be very careful what you open yourself up to. Be very careful what you allow access. It's like, I don't know if anybody saw that movie. I don't know, Phil, if you saw the movie Nefarious, but Nefarious, it came out last year. It's actually with Sean Patrick Flannery, I think is his name.
Oh,
He was
okay,
the
I'll
guy
look it
from
up.
Utah States. That's
Oh,
100%
okay. Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
he played two roles. He played the role of a prisoner, but then he also played a role of a demon called Nefarious. And so in the dialogue between Nefarious, the attorney, or not the attorney, the psychologist was asking how, if you're a demon, how did you come to possess Edward Wayne Brady? How did you come to possess? And he said it was through a series of tests. It may begin with just a stealing of a toy. It may begin, but eventually they increase in intensity. And if you get enough yeses, then eventually you can subjugate. And then he made a statement that rocked me, and I hear and I think about it now. Is he said fully subjugated? Fully, Edward Wayne Brady was portrayed as being fully subjugated, meaning completely overwhelmed with demons, completely possessed, completely tormented, everything like that. And this is the reason why I'm saying this, is because be very careful what you say yes to. Be very careful. It's what God said to Cain. Sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is to have mastery over you, but you must overcome it. And so I can only imagine the history behind all of the different places that you've gone to, and I would love to know. You mentioned about Onset and the witchcraft and the Satanists. I don't even know if the church is still there. I know Emmanuel is there. It goes by a different name now, but I don't know if the Satanist church is still there. But it's interesting how you and I both have sort of a similar starting point. We both have a similar starting point in this realm between good and evil. And now look at where we are today. I'm not going to date us as far as our age, but
prime age.
Yeah, we are in our prime. Recently, the pastor of my church, his wife told him, they said that he was in his prime. So you know what? I'm going to adopt it. Sorry, here we are we're in our prime right now. So we're just getting started.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah, so I love what you do, because you're shining a light on something that I think a lot of people can be deceived by. And I love where God is taking you with the prayer requests. And, you mentioned leaving the 99, if only one. And so I love that. So I would encourage anybody, if you're familiar with me, my page, I would encourage you, check out Phil's page. See exactly what he does. He's on Instagram. He recently, is going to be doing something with YouTube. So I want you to, just check it out. Watch some of the videos. I've watched some of the videos. I think the word Hamakak, I think it's Hamakak.
Hakamak. Yeah.
Hakamak. That's what it is.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I've seen over and over and over. Or the Bridgewater Triangle, I think, is another one that I think you did. The Bridgewater Triangle. Yeah. All of these different things, but here's the other thing though. Like, have you gone to Salem at all? Because I think of the Salem witch trials, and I think of all that stuff. Like, New England has a spiritual heritage. Like, it's where the Pilgrims, the Puritans, so it has a history and a heritage in righteousness, but we also know it has a heritage of darkness. So have you gone to Salem at all?
Salem, not yet, but it is on my list. It is on my list, because I can only imagine there's got to be some evil stuff going on up there, no doubt. And just that whole thing is just a very strange. It's hard to separate like what reality from because after a certain point it gets to be hearsay. People are just pointing fingers at everybody. After a certain point, so then you're like, what really happened here? Was there really witchcraft, or was it just something else? So. I'd be interested to find out. Because that's on my list, so I will be definitely checking that out.
So as we sort of wrap this up and bring it to a close, and before I do that, I want to thank anybody that's joined in and anybody that's watched this. So Phil and I both thank you for tuning in, and we thank you even if you watch it after the live stream. We want to thank you for your support. So I'm sure I can speak for Phil when I say thank you for that. But Phil, one question that I want to ask you, and it's sort of just an invitation to anyone. So given your experience with, we'll just say, the paranormal and everything like that, if you could give any piece of advice to anybody that's either maybe skeptical or anything like that, or and tying it into the spiritual, good and evil and everything like that, like what would you say to anybody that, either maybe skeptical, maybe on the fence, what would you say from a Christian perspective?
Hmm. I guess I would say, well, if it's like a non-believer, like a skeptical non-believer, like non-Christian person, I would probably say, give my videos a watch. After a certain point, I think there'll be no doubt that there's something going on that you can't explain at the very least. Now, if you're a Christian person who's more skeptical, I would just say, give it a shot, give it a chance. Obviously, it's not for everybody. No content is for everybody. So I'm not going to say that my content is for everybody, because it's not for everybody. Everyone has different tastes. But I try to be as honest as possible. I'm not a sensationalizer. So when you watch my videos, whatever happens actually happened. And I just go out there, I go into a location, I use technology to record, audio, video, and other instruments to try to find evidence of the afterlife, and obviously not only the afterlife, but spiritual things, good, evil, and not only just evil things, but good things as well. For a while, I don't know if you saw this video or not, but for a while, I was praying and praying and praying for, like, God, please, like, show up in my videos if this is, like, the right path for me. Like, please show me, like, show up for me somewhere, somehow, some way, show up. And so before this moment, I kept on getting a lot of responses that were saying things like help, or please pray for me was one of them, or pray for me, please pray, stuff like that. And so I'm in the Huckamuck, which is a place I go to all the time. And so this one particular day, I just felt really great. I just remember looking around and being like, man, I just feel awesome. And this is kind of like what you were saying with the thinning, kind of goes into there, because this one particular area could be a place where it's thin, but on the good side.
Right.
So basically what I'm going to tell you is an angel encounter I had. Now, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything in the moment. I didn't hear anything in the moment. I just felt great. And I was walking down this pathway. I kind of looking around. I stopped for a moment. I'm looking at the swamp. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. And then I keep on walking. I get home. I'm going over the footage. I'm looking at stuff. I get to this moment. And as I get to this moment, I hear on the audio, like I said, there's nothing on the screen. You're just seeing a pathway and grass and trees, and you don't see anything. It's all audio on this. So I start hearing what sounds like singing, holy, 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 which is exactly what angels do when they are like singing to God. You know what I mean?
Right.
They say holy, 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 and then shortly right after that, there's a voice that comes through, and it says peace. And when it says peace, it sounds like it's in a huge amphitheater, like magnified. Like it's quiet, but it has an echo to it, like a huge echo, like as if say if it was in a huge place, in a place where it would echo, you could really a huge echo. So you hear the word peace. All of a sudden, then you can hear like what sounds like music and harps playing, that kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden, all that stuff kind of fades out. The wind kind of picks up, and then it just fades away completely. And that was it. That was the moment right there. So I accounted that as like either, like you said, some sort of a thinning spot where I was capturing a glimpse of heaven, or an angel was there. I don't know what it was, but definitely something for sure. And it seemed like it was a good thing and not like a bad thing. You know what I mean? Because when evil's around, like a spiritual attack or something, like you said, that feeling. And when you're having a moment at the altar, or you're singing, worshiping or something, those like, you feel God's presence or something, or you feel good, or you know what I mean, you generally feel better or really great, you know what I mean, in those kind of moments. But so it was just a weird kind of cool moment, especially like I took it as a good thing, not like a bad thing. But yeah, I mean, just a cool moment. Like I couldn't ask for like a cooler like moment. So please everyone, check that out if you want to take a listen to that, because I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on what you guys think, because it's definitely interesting. I don't
know if anybody watches this, but I'm a big fan of Jason Upton. So Jason Upton did a
Yes,
song.
yes,
Jason Upton, and you probably know where I'm going with this reference.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
Jason
Yep.
Upton does a song called "Fly," and so it's interesting because you just hear Jason Upton singing like you normally would, and I've seen Jason Upton live. So you hear Jason Upton singing, and then as you listen to it, all of a sudden the whole audio, the whole sound changes. You hear this unbelievable harmony and a range that just blows me away. And then you just hear this. So I would encourage you, go on Spotify, go on Prime Music, go on Apple Music, go wherever you want to listen to it, and look up Jason Upton's song "Fly" because it goes along with what Phil's saying, because it's almost and Isaiah Saldivar, if any of you are familiar with Isaiah Saldivar, he did a video about it. It's been on TikTok, it's been on Instagram, and you listen to it, and you can hear it. Like, it's undeniable. It's you just there's no way you can listen to it and be like, that's not, because they went back and played it. It was captured solely on audio. And I think if I remember correctly, someone said that they saw an angel standing behind Jason. If I remembering the reports correctly about they saw an angel actually standing there with Jason Upton.
Wow.
And so, and then you hear it in the audio. So what does the Bible say? We entertain angels unaware, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely possible for this. So, yeah. So this battle between good and evil, this battle between light and darkness, this battle, I'm just going to say, between thin places and strongholds, like, I think is something that we have to recognize and understand. And, just this need to arm ourselves with the truth, right? I love that Phil's approaching this from a Christian perspective rather than just from something that you would see on, Discovery Plus or something like that. Maybe you'll be on Discovery Plus one day. Who knows? Maybe you'll be on PureFlix. I don't know. I don't think you'll be on PureFlix. But
that would be great.
yeah, all of a sudden we'll see you on PureFlix. Exploring with Phil on PureFlix. So I like it that you're doing it from a Christian perspective, because I think it can be skewed, and I think it can be misunderstood. So, yeah. So, Phil, I don't know if there's anything else as we bring this video to a close. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share, any other type of encouragement or
yeah, I would just say thank you for having me on. I thought this was an awesome discussion, an awesome time. I mean, I could get together with you and hang out, and just, talk like this, not on air, just hang out. But yeah, it's been far too long. So thank you for having me on. This is an awesome discussion. We'll have to maybe even do another one on some other maybe specific topics if you want, like as far as like maybe even get into some Nephilim stuff if you want. Because that whole thing, we could do a million episodes on that. So
yeah,
so I find all that stuff super interesting. I like all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So just thank you. And if anyone doesn't want prayer out there, feel free to reach out. I will pray for you. Just let me know what you want prayer for, and I'll pray for you guys for sure. And please pray for me and Stephen. And thanks, Stephen, because this has been awesome. So discover your voice.
Yeah, and if any of you do need prayer, feel free to reach out. I mean, you've got both of us that are willing to pray for you, so you can reach out to us both. My private messenger is open, so you can send me a message and I'll pray for you. You can feel free to even write unspoken in the comments, and we'll see it, and we'll see your name and we'll pray for you. But yeah, definitely let us know your prayer request. Definitely let us know your thoughts. And at the end of the day, let's make sure that we live our lives for the Lord, and make sure that everything that we do is for Him and for His glory and for His honor. So yeah, Phil, we'll definitely have to do another discussion. Nephilim, I've done a lot of research on Nephilim. I've done a lot of research on that, Zanzumim, and all of those different names that you find in the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers and all of. So I get it. So we'll have to definitely do this again. Sooner rather than later, because I think a lot of people are misinformed, and I think a lot of people are undereducated, and they just don't know. And this can be basically, if there's one piece of advice I can give you to watching this video, Phil mentioned some of these, Nephilim races. There's one piece of advice that I could leave you with, right? It's simply this. It's 4 words. Actually 5. Read your Bible for yourself. Like, read the word. Like, the only way to safeguard yourself against deception is to know the truth. So read the Bible, like what Phil has mentioned with some of this stuff about the Nephilim. Like it's all in the Bible. It's there. Og, king of Bashan, all of this stuff like is there. With Sihon, all of these different kings, Goliath had brothers. All of these, it's there in the Bible. The days of Noah. And one final thing I will leave you with: Jesus described the last days, right? He described
Thank
it
you.
as it was during the days of Noah and as it was during the days of Lot. So you think of Phil mentioning Nephilim, you know what Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed for. What Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed for is a big part of our culture and society today. And I'm being sort of politically correct with what I say here. But what you see with Sodom and Gomorrah, you see in our culture and in our society right now. And so we are living in the days of Noah. We are living in the days of Lot. So be mindful. Read the Bible for yourself. Read Second Peter 2. Read Jude. Read all of these different passages and arm yourself, right? Because the only way that you can overcome deceit and falsehood is to arm yourself with the truth. So yeah, read your Bible for yourself. Get in the Word and arm yourself with the truth. And stay tuned. Bill and I are going to be doing more videos like this. We're going to be approaching different topics. So I love that God sort of linked us up. We have similar stories. You've heard it. If you've lasted this long, congrats. Kudos to you, an hour and 21 minutes. So congrats, you're a rock star, even if you didn't last the whole time. But like God bringing us having similar stories with our dads, with the church, with all of these different things. So stay tuned, right? We're gonna be doing some more videos. They're gonna be more intense and subjects that just aren't being talked about.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right.
Awesome.
Well, brother, you have a great night, and we'll link up again soon.
Sounds good, man. Nice talking to you.
You as well.
See you, everybody.
See you later, guys.